All right, welcome everyone. This is Sarah from SMA's Community Support Department. We're so glad to have you join us for this Traveling with SMA Resources webinar. We also want to give a big thank you to our gold sponsors, Biogen and Genentech, and silver sponsor, Scholar Rock, for generously supporting this travel program. I have two housekeeping items for you that I want to highlight before we get started. So first, if you'd like to change your view settings so the attendee videos don't cover any portion of your PowerPoint screen that you see here, please click the View button on the top right-hand corner of your screen and select Side-by-Side Speaker View. Second, please note that all attendees will remain muted during the webinar. If you have any feedback or questions, you can submit them throughout the webinar using the chat box in your toolbar. Just select SMA as the recipient to ensure that your questions get to the right staff member. If you have any questions after today's presentation, you can contact the community support team at communitysupport@curesma.org. I would now like to welcome our Senior Manager of Social Work and mother of two awesome kids with SMA, Danny Sutton. Turning it over to you, Danny.
Thanks so much, Sarah. I appreciate that. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining us this evening for our very first Traveling with SMA webinar. We're excited to have you all here. And we have lots of helpful information and new resources to share with you all. So we're going to jump right in. So our highlight program of this webinar is our new travel support package that you may have seen on our social medias and shared through emails. This package is for adults with SMA who live in the United States. Our goal with this package is to support the travel needs of those with SMA so that air travel is safer and more comfortable. On the screen here, you'll see what is included in that package, and we'll run through each item here. So there is an ADAPTS portable transfer sling, which is a lightweight manual lifting sling to assist with transferring from a wheelchair to a seat on an airplane or any other surface while you're traveling. It could also be used at home. It's very lightweight and compact. It can fold up and is easy to travel with. It does require two people to help lift on each side, but it's very comfortable and supportive, so it's a great option to have with you. Secondly, our package includes the Apple AirTag as well as an Apple AirTag case holder. So this is a very handy tool because you can attach the AirTag to your wheelchair or any other valuable piece of medical equipment, and then you can track it physically. So even when you're on board the airplane, you can see that your medical device or wheelchair is physically on the plane with you, even if you can't see it. Next in our package is the memory foam travel pillow, which is a pillow that can be twisted into different shapes to help support with seating and comfort while traveling. So you can see here in the picture that it could be used for lumbar support or for neck or head support throughout your trip, and is really quite versatile. The next item that you'll see is called a job ticket holder, but for our purposes, what it really does is provides a safe waterproof sleeve for wheelchair handling instructions to be attached to your wheelchair. And then this allows for you to be able to give those instructions to crew members that are handling your wheelchair when you can't be present. And then lastly, you'll see the twist and lock stool, which is a stool that is very handy because when it's not in use, you can collapse it into a flat disc that's just a couple inches high and can easily be attached to a wheelchair. However, it can also expand to various heights to allow for it to become a footstool or a seat for anyone to use while on the go. It supports up to 330 pounds, and it can be really helpful for caregivers to be able to sit on and support their back while helping with side transferring or clothing or just other caregiving support. So those are the items within the package. On our website, you'll find more information about the package, the link to request it, along with descriptions and links to each item that are included. So we also have our new Traveling with SMA webpage, which we're very excited about. This page is entirely dedicated to helping make travel, especially travel by air, as safe and comfortable and accessible as possible. At the end of the presentation tonight, we'll have the direct link, so you are able to know exactly where to find this page on our SMA website. So on this page, you'll find a lot of information. You will find all the information for the travel support package, as well as the travel guides that we've created, and a variety of links to other resources that will help you as you plan your travels and take your next trip. So we'll explore a little bit more of what is on the page now. So you will find a link to request all of our resource guides. Here you can see 3 of them. On the left side, we have our general Traveling with SMA guide, which includes information on all aspects of travel, not just air travel. We also, in the middle, have our air travel resource guide. So this is an overview of helpful air travel resources. The goal was, imagine if you did an internet search for how to travel by air with SMA. These are some of the most helpful websites you'll find. They include links to various US Department of Transportation sites, helpful travel Facebook groups, complete travel guides that you can print off and take with you, and then sites that have tips and tricks for general traveling when you have a disability. And then lastly, on this slide, you'll see our air travel checklist. This is a streamlined list of items that you can check off while you're planning your trip, before your trip, while you're at the airport. And then should you encounter a problem with your wheelchair or a medical device that's damaged, this provides you with the steps of what you should do to make sure that that is addressed. Next, we have some additional guides here. And again, these are all available to request on our website. First, we have our guide to airplane cargo hold dimensions. Basically what this is a very long list. It's actually 2 pages long that lists many types of aircrafts and then gives you the height and the width of the door into the cargo hold space where wheelchairs are stowed. So this is important because when you're booking your flight, it's important to make sure that your wheelchair is going to fit into that cargo hold space. So it also will help you if you are needing to plan ahead to make sure that maybe perhaps you need to recline the back of your chair so that it's not quite as high, or you need to remove some parts of it so that it's going to fit through that door, so that when you get to the airport and go to board the plane, you and your chair are able to get on there. Next, we have resources that the one in the middle and the one on the right are resources that are made for the purpose of creating your own wheelchair tags to attach to your wheelchair. We started to see people in the community getting really creative and making these custom wheelchair tags to attach. And we reached out to several members and asked if it would be all right if we shared their examples for everyone to learn from in one central location. So here on the right, you can see the create your own custom wheelchair tag document. And at the bottom, you can see 4 examples that community members have put together and shared with us. On the website, you'll be able to click on each example and take a closer look at the details that the wheelchair users have included based on their wheelchair and their needs. So definitely take a look at the website. You can request this guide be mailed to you as well, and then explore some of those custom wheelchair tags closer to see if you'd like to create your own tag for your next flight. Another section of this new website is a section that includes some helpful travel resources and additional links. This is information such as TSA Cares, which is a program run by the TSA to help disabled travelers through airport security. We also have those travel-focused Facebook groups, as well as links to Wheel the World, which is a website committed to providing detailed information about accessible travel. And there's also a link to Curb Free with Cory Lee, who you will meet on our community panel in just a little bit. So this section of our website is to provide some resources for knowing your rights when traveling by airplane. This includes a resource guide that you can request and print out and have with you or save it on your phone of what your rights are as a disabled traveler. We also have detailed information on the website about the importance of reporting airlines for ACAA or Air Carrier Access Act violations. So this would include damages to your wheelchair or other medical devices, or not providing you with accommodations that are legally protected for you as you travel. And because these violations are often underreported, it's very common that they're underreported, it's important to report those violations when they occur so that airlines can be held accountable for those infractions. So now I'd like to introduce you to Sarah Bellish, an adult with SMA and manager of policy and advocacy here at Cure SMA, who will be sharing an update on accessible airline travel advocacy efforts being made by the SMA community.
Thank you, Danny. Hi, so I'm Sarah Bellish. So I help to run our grassroots efforts here at Cure SMA, which has included air travel over this past year. So this has been a big year for air travel for the SMA community because we were actually able to get a bill called the FAA reauthorization passed this past May. So this piece of legislation governs everything airlines, but there was a whole section on people with disabilities. So I outlined a few of the key provisions that were in this legislation, which includes improved training for airline staff, enhanced accessibility at airports, additional consumer protections for those of us with disabilities, better data collection on air travel experiences, just like Danny was saying, we need to collect when all these incidents are happening, and then feasibility studies on wheelchair compatible seating. So all of these things have been passed, but right now we're going to start working on the implementation stage. So my ask for all of you is to continue to stay engaged. We'll probably have surveys and opportunities for you guys to get involved throughout the year on accessible air travel. And that's where we will need your voices to be heard to make sure that all of these things that are in this piece of legislation are implemented and implemented with our input. Our end goal here at Cure SMA is to ensure that one day we'll be able to use our own wheelchairs as our aircraft seats. If you want to get more involved, we have a link at the bottom of the page, but you can also check out our advocacy page on the website. Thank you, Danny.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for that advocacy update. So now we're excited to invite on a panel of adults with SMA who have extensive experience traveling and are all here to share what they've learned to help the entire SMA community feel more prepared to book the flight and pack your car for a road trip and take the trips that you've been wanting to. So I will let each of them tell you a little bit more about themselves as we get started, and then we'll be answering as many questions as possible that were submitted prior to today's webinar. We do want to note that none of their suggestions or experiences should be taken as medical advice. So please listen to their experiences and their stories, and then consult with your medical team or your care provider to determine what's going to be the best solution for you while you're traveling. So without further ado, we are going to welcome tonight's panelists, Shane Burcaw, Kevan Chandler, Christine Getman, Cory Lee, and Christa Saul. Give us just a minute while we get everybody here to join us, and then we will start with some questions. Okay, looks like we have everybody. All right, so we had a plethora of questions submitted over the last month while the community was all preparing for this webinar. So we really appreciate everyone's involvement, and we're gonna hop right into them. So the first question was, how do you manage using the restroom on long or international flights? And Cory, Christine, and Shane are going to share with us their experiences. So Cory, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much for having me tonight. I'm excited to be here and to see everyone. I registered today for next year's conference, so looking forward to that already. But on flights, what I do, I mean, probably like most people on this call, I really watch what I'm eating and drinking and let the like 24 to 48 hours before the flight. So I'm kind of like dehydrating myself, not really eating much of anything in the like 24 hours leading up to the flight, just because I want to avoid needing to use the restroom. So probably not the safest thing to do by any means, but it works for me, and I've kind of learned what my body can and can't handle. And then on the flight, I always wear like adult briefs, and then I flew to Tokyo about a month ago, which was almost a 15-hour flight nonstop, and needed to use the restroom about halfway through the flight. And so for the first time ever, we just like used a blanket and put it up over me. And I went and like a portable like urinal and like there in the plane seat. So nobody could see anything. Like everyone else was pretty much asleep. So for me, it worked, but I know that like isn't an option for everyone, but that was the first time I've ever tried that, and it actually worked phenomenally well and like really eased my mind about what the future could possibly hold for me, and like maybe I can do that again on a longer flight. So yeah.
That's great, thank you.
Yeah.
Christine, do you want to share your experience?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I love that this is the first topic. We're just diving right in.
I know. Right into it. We're all friends here.
I have yet to use the restroom on the plane itself, but it's all about doing that math, like Cory said. If I have a long flight, 5-6 hours plus, then I actually get to the airport earlier and find an accessible restroom. And I usually require a 2-person lift, or we kind of have a way to make it work. There are more airports now that are getting the transfer tables, which are awesome. I have my favorite little corner in the Orlando airport. And so for me, it's just about the timing, when to have my last sip of coffee, and then whether or not I'm using the restroom last at home or at the airport, and just doing that reverse engineered schedule of, okay, did we rent a van? Do we need to get a taxi? And that kind of dictates how much I can or cannot consume, but I have yet to try on a plane, but I'll try the Cory method sometime. Actually, spoiler, I think it's the Shane method too. Shane, you tell us.
Yeah, Shane, tell us your experience.
Yeah, so my experiences are very similar to Cory and Christine. I am very careful about how much I consume in the days leading up to the flight, which is not fun, but you have to, it's the logistics. It's what you got to do. I have gone to the bathroom on an airplane a few times, using Cory's method of, having my caregiver hold up a blanket and cover me so that everything was, not visible, and using a travel urinal that we had in one of our carry-on bags. It was super, like, I felt very uncomfortable, I'll be honest. Like, I didn't enjoy that experience, but it meant that I was able to indulge in the wine that was available in our first flight ever to London. And that was more important to me than not peeing. So I got to have the wine on the flight, felt amazing, and ended up having to use the bathroom. It's fairly simple. If I ever had to do number 2, I honestly don't know what I would do, other than, as Cory does, wear adult briefs. So yeah, I am very excited for accessible bathrooms on airplanes so that we don't need to dehydrate ourselves leading up to flights.
Yes, 100%. I'm with you on that. Okay, so we had several questions come through about traveling, how to make it affordable, particularly when you're traveling and you need to bring a caregiver with you. So that price kind of doubles, and how do you afford that? So I think Christine had some tips and some things that you do to help make it more affordable.
I mean, we got to get crafty. I am obsessed with airline miles, not only just with collecting them by traveling, but with shopping. I'm loyal to Alaska. For the most part, I think none of us are giving medical advice or endorsing any particular airline, but that's just where it went. And honestly, it was because of the first time my chair was damaged. I got a lot of points, and then I got addicted to collecting them in more helpful ways that didn't involve damaging my chair. So I use like Alaska mileage shopping, but I just get really crafty with points and deals. Oftentimes I can purchase at least one companion flight with the points. But then we also are mileage plan members, so there's one more companion flight available per year. So that's where it's fun. It feels like a video game trying to rack up the points ahead of a trip. So that's my method.
And then Cory, you had some tips and tricks that you could share.
Yeah, I also did the same as Christine. I am a points addict, no doubt about it. So I have the Delta Amex, like all the Delta points that I can get, the better. So I use every method possible for those. And then in addition to collecting points, whenever I'm traveling internationally, I travel with two people with me, so two care attendants. And that's just because I know when I'm traveling internationally, like things are going to be harder. So if it's in the US, I just take one person with me, but if it's international, I want to take two. And so finding hotel rooms, especially in Europe, that will allow 3 people in one room is very difficult. So I'm usually spending a lot of time trying to find a hotel that will allow 3 people to be in one room. So like 2 queen size beds or 2 double beds or whatever combination works. And so that is one way to save money instead of booking like a whole separate room for that 3rd person. And then I've also heard that Air Canada, I've never flown with them personally, but as long as you're traveling domestically within Canada, then they do allow for caregivers to fly for free. So if you're wanting to explore Canada like pretty in depth, that could maybe be an option as well.
That's great. So something when we were talking about, when we were preparing for this webinar, was you had said, I spend a lot of time looking for just what I need. And that's the truth, is sometimes we have to put in that extra time and energy, but hopefully on the back end, but then once you're experiencing it, hopefully that makes it all worth it, right?
Oh yeah, it always is worth it in the end, but it takes a while to get there.
All right. And then Christine, you had shared in terms of talking or traveling with caregivers, you had talked about just how you do that sort of planning for expectations, or sort of planning for traveling with caregivers, and thought maybe you want to share that with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have learned trial and error and had some hard moments, but I think it's really important if you're taking a caregiver, particularly someone who's used to being paid hourly and you need to negotiate expectations for the trip, be very, very clear ahead of time. I've learned the hard way. So, this might involve having things in writing and being clear that you need help, maybe getting up for the day and getting back in bed, and tell them when they're off. I've had some situations in the past where, I said, oh, this is when I need help. And then they just kind of hung around the whole time. And then they expected to be paid 24/7 when we got home. And it was a shock to me. And I wasn't as confident back then as I am now. So just make sure that you get things in writing, you're clear, but state your needs, because this is your trip. And also, when having this discussion with folks, make sure that you're in a position where you actually feel confident. Make sure you're up in your chair, wherever you feel most powerful. I've had experiences. This goes beyond just travel and care negotiations, but make sure that you feel as though the power is the power dynamic is equal. So if you feel confident up in your chair, at your desk, taking notes with your computer, make sure that you feel confident having that conversation and holding your ground on what you need and what you expect, because you are the most important.
Thank you. That's such good advice. Self-advocacy all the time. So important. Okay, and then we had some questions on traveling, if you're using a ventilator or a trach or other respiratory equipment. And Christa and Christine are going to share their experience with us. So Christa, would you like to start us off on your experience traveling and how you make that work with your respiratory support?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I have a trach, and I'm on the ventilator at night when I sleep. So I have to make sure I have all of my tubing, and I bring backup tubing. Because I had an incident where the humidifier broke on the cruise, and it was 3 nights. So I learned my lesson there. I try to bring a backup if I can of everything.
And Christine, how about you, your experience with this?
Yeah, so lately I actually don't bring my ventilator into the cabin. That's just because my flights have been shorter and I have enough strength, but I do bring the suction machine with me. And that has been an interesting thing. Sometimes they'll just look past it, and I've had a few flight attendants stop and ask, what is it? What's the model? We need to run it by the pilot. So that's always interesting, because, oh, last week I didn't need to go through this. But I will say, whatever your breathing situation is, if you are bringing your ventilator on board, make sure to call and arrange it in advance. I know it's obvious for us, right? What we need and what we have going on, but I think people see a trach, they see a ventilator, and they instantly assume oxygen. And that might not be the case. Oftentimes those of us with SMA are not bleeding in oxygen. But so it feels like a broken record, having to tell every step of the way that no, there's no oxygen, or, I'm not bringing it on board. And so I think that's my best advice is, you're going to feel like a broken record, and it's okay, and just continue to clarify what it is that you have and what you need. And that's what I have.
Thank you. I agree. It's plan, and then plan some more, right? Yes. Okay, and then we had a question that from someone who was wondering if there are any foundations that help adults take a one-time trip similar to Make-A-Wish for children. And so Cory has a resource that he would like to share.
Yeah, back in 2022, I launched a nonprofit called the Curb Free Foundation. And so through the Curb Free Foundation, we provide travel grants to wheelchair users so that they can go on their dream trip. So far, we have awarded 6 different dream trips. We've sent someone to Morocco recently. We've sent people on cruises to Nashville, Tennessee, to a concert, to Disney World, kind of all over the place. But we are constantly seeking applications and wanting people to fill those out. So if you are interested in potentially going on your dream trip, just go to the curbfreefoundation.com and fill out the application and let us know why you want to go to that destination as your dream trip. And then our board will review every application, and hopefully we'll be able to award that trip to you.
That's so cool. Thanks, Cory.
Yeah.
So we obviously had a lot of questions about how do you avoid having your wheelchair damaged or other medical devices damaged. And we've shared some of those resources that we have on our website and available for people to request in the form of resource guides. But Cory and Kevan are going to share a bit with us about how do you prepare and what do you do if potentially something happens to your chair when you get to your destination. So Kevan, would you like to start us off?
I think Christa is actually doing this one.
Oh, Christa. Sorry about that, Kevan.
You're good.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, what was it?
The question was, how do you avoid your wheelchair becoming damaged when you're traveling? Are there any steps that you take to?
Well, I carried some tools in my backpack. So I have like all the tools that I need for my headdress. and my joystick, and I kind of show everyone, you know, how to adjust my chair, but I've never really had to use it, luckily.
And I remember you mentioning that you always have backup items too. So like maybe if your power wheelchair is not damaged,
I do.
you think of like your medical equipment so that if something gets damaged, you have
Right.
extra.
I try to bring a backup of everything I can if it's not too heavy or too much. But yeah.
Awesome, thank you. And then Cory, I think you know something about, have some ideas on your, what do you do if you get there and there's some.
Yeah, I mean, if you do arrive in a destination and there are damages to your chair, like immediately ask to speak with a complaint resolution official, a CRO within the airport, file a damage report. You cannot do that once you leave the airport. So be sure to do it while you're physically in the airport. Number one, very important. Also, as you guys were mentioning earlier, be sure to file a report with the Department of Transportation on their complaint form. Just hold the airlines accountable. It's super important that we all do that. And then if your wheelchair is damaged, a couple weeks ago, we recently launched the Wheelchair Survival Toolkit, which is a product that has all kinds of tools in it. So everything from like hex keys to duct tape to anything, any kind of tool that you can imagine that could potentially fix your wheelchair if it's damaged. It's in that toolkit. The toolkit folds up and can simply hang on the back of your wheelchair. So it's really easy to travel with. Everything in it is TSA approved. So if you want to check that out as a resource, it's at wheelchairsurvivaltoolkit.com.
Thank you, Cory and Christa. So it sounds like the name of the game is have some tools for you, right? Okay, so our next question is about traveling overseas or well outside of your time zone. Questions were regarding medication. Do you switch up the times? How do you go about getting refills if you need one? You realize that you need a refill of medication while you're traveling. How do you plan to have proper electrical connections for charging your equipment? Things like that. So I think, Kevan, this was you. You were going to share some of your insight on this.
Yeah. Well, specifically with medication, I can't really speak for the other medications, but I'm on Evrysdi, and my wife and I do a lot of traveling across time zones. And as far as the timing of it and when I take it, we have an alarm on our phone, and we just kind of leave it as is. And so if we are across the country or we're overseas, if it's, if it's a 24-hour difference, we're probably going to tackle that differently, but we haven't done that yet together since starting the medication. But a few hours, it's okay to just, if you take it at 11 o'clock normally, just take it at 11 o'clock and wherever you are then. And the nice thing too is the medicine does have I think it's like a 6-hour window or something, so there's quite a grace period there. But I have run into a lot of situations where I'll be planning to travel and realizing that that's when my next shipment is going to be coming in. And so it's really nice. It's a little more difficult when you're on the road, and it gets mixed up there. But if you know that you're going to be traveling and the shipment's going to be coming during that time, you can just call Accredo or whatever the pharmacy is and give them the new address. I'm actually going to be doing that over Christmas at my parents' house. So, but if you're on the road, one time we were kind of moving from city to city every other night or so, and I felt like Accredo was chasing us across the country. Like, well, it didn't make it here today. Can you have them actually send it to the next place? And so But hopefully they can work with you on where you're going to be and when.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to note, like what you said, if you're traveling, if it's a 24-hour difference, then reach out to your pharmacist, or if it's through a Credo, reach out to them. They have pharmacists that can talk to you and just tell you when would be the best time to adjust your medication. So that's a great point. And then Cory, could you tell us about electrical connections and making sure that you can charge your chair in different countries?
Yeah, so that's something that I really stress out about ever since the first time I went to Europe. I plugged my wheelchair battery charger into the outlet, had an adapter, the converter, like all the things I thought I needed, and it actually blew up and like sparks were flying. It was a terrible experience. So we had to quickly find a wheelchair repair shop in Munich, Germany, and go buy a new wheelchair charger. And so that's something that I do before every international trip, is just try to locate a wheelchair repair company in that destination in case something goes wrong. Like I know where to go, who to call to get a new charger, to get it repaired. And then also I actually went ahead and bought a 220 volt charger. And so now if I'm traveling pretty much anywhere in Europe, or any destination that isn't the same voltage as the US, like if it's 220 volt, then I just take that charger with me, and it's a lot easier than taking a converter and hoping and kind of like crossing my fingers that the converter will work, because I've heard too many horror stories about those. So if you are interested in that method, you could simply contact like your local wheelchair repair company and tell them that you want to buy a 220 volt charger. And a lot of chargers nowadays, like even are dual voltage. So they'll already be like 110 volt, 220 volt. So maybe just check your current wheelchair charger and hopefully it's already dual voltage. But if it isn't, just contact your local repair company and express your interest in buying a 220 volt.
Absolutely. That's such a good idea. Okay, and then Cory, could you talk about finding wheelchair van rentals? So both in the US and then, or just accessible vehicle rentals in Europe if you're traveling overseas.
Yeah. So if I am traveling overseas, then I usually depend on local tour companies within that destination. So they provide kind of like all of the transportation. So I really utilize resources like Will the World, or Disabled Accessible Travel is another company that has locations all over Europe. So in every major European city, and they do have accessible transportation available that you can pre-book in advance. You can book that pretty much as far in advance as you want to. So I think it's never too early to start planning if you know you're going to be going on a trip somewhere. And then in the US, I also, I mean, like for internationally, I depend on public transportation a lot. So some cities have really great public transportation, which is definitely cheaper than booking private vehicles. So, if you're debating between a few different destinations and want to do a budget-friendly trip, maybe choose the one that has, the better accessible public transportation. And then if I'm traveling in the US, really getting an accessible rental van is usually the easiest option for me, depending on where I'm traveling. And I usually use Mobility Works for that. So Mobility Works has locations pretty much all over the country, and they do offer wheelchair accessible van rentals.
Thank you so much. Okay, our next question was, what do you do when you get to a hotel and you find out that the bed is not a good height for transferring, for using an electric lift, Hoyer lift? What are your strategies? So Shane and Cory, I think, have some ideas. Shane, do you want to start us off?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, so this happens quite a bit for us. I do not use a Hoyer lift, but so my wife transfers me into bed. Often the accessible rooms that we try to book have very low beds, because that's accessible in other ways. But for my wife's back, as she's lifting me, lowering me down to a low bed, that can be more difficult for her. So what we found can be helpful is or doing things like changing outfits, or I lie down to use the bathroom usually. She will lift me onto a different surface in the hotel room, like a desk or the top of a dresser, and we usually lay some towels or a blanket down so that it's softer. But I have gotten changed on many a desk in many hotels all over because it's just easier than having to lower me all the way down into the a low bed. I've not yet slept on a desk, but that may be in my future, so we'll see.
Thank you. And then Cory, you have a good option for helping to raise beds. It's good for traveling.
Yeah, so a couple years ago, I started taking yoga blocks with me pretty much everywhere I go. So I need the bed to be usually between like 25 to 29 inches. So if it is an accessible room, like Shane was saying, and the beds are lower, to get the bed to be taller, we simply help get the hotel staff to help lift the bed and put the yoga blocks underneath. And so the yoga blocks are really great because they're super lightweight. They weigh like nothing. And so taking 4 of those in the luggage will not make a difference really, like in the weight of the luggage. They're not heavy. So yoga blocks, like I bought them on Amazon for super cheap. And they've lasted me now for like 2 years. So they're very durable also.
It's a great idea. And as someone who does yoga blocks you can set at different heights.
Yeah.
So that's also very helpful in case for people who don't do yoga and don't know that you can have 3 different options for the height of the bed using those. So that's such a great idea. All right. And then we kind of along the same lines of what you were talking about, Shane, like changing clothes and things like that. Someone asked how or where do you change clothes or help with hygiene with a teen or an adult when you can't find an accessible bathroom and say you're traveling on the road. And Kevan had a great idea for this that I'd never thought about. So do you share your suggestion, Kevan?
Yeah, well, so when I've done this mostly on road trips, if I have someone with me who can't just, throw me over their shoulder in a normal bathroom stall, and it's a long drive, so I need to use the restroom, I'm glad that you clarified at the beginning that you guys aren't supporting what we're saying. We're just throwing out ideas. But I have been known to stop by a hospital or emergency room specifically on the road, wherever we are. And I'll just go in and clarify very calmly that it's not an emergency. I'm not like checking in to the hospital, but I need help with the restroom. And is there a male nurse technician that could help me? And so the nice thing about a hospital is A, they're going to have plenty of handicap bathrooms, and B, they're going to have plenty of people that technically can help you. And if you just go in with confidence that this is a very normal thing, it's not weird, it's not unusual, or potentially not allowed, and you just say, hey, this is what I need and I've done it before, do you mind calling a nurse down to help? Usually they're pretty cool with it. And so just do your business and get out before they realize what's happening. So yeah.
I think I might have heard one time, Shane, I might be remembering incorrectly, but I think I might have heard one time that you had asked a stranger to help you use the bathroom somewhere. And I just had a conversation with my daughter about this too. If you're somewhere and you need to use the restroom, like ask someone that you think looks trustworthy. If you're by yourself, people like to help. So if you need to ask for help, ask for help. What's the worst thing they can say is no, right?
I support that. Yeah, I've asked plenty of strangers for help with all kinds of things, and usually people are very willing to help.
Yeah, I think that's a good reminder. Okay, and then Shane, while I have you, the next question is for you. It's about creating supportive seating while you're on an airplane.
Yes, so I cannot physically sit upright in a standard airline chair. As you see here, I'm wearing shoulder straps that hold me upright, and I've not yet found a system that works for a regular airline chair where I'm comfortable and safe and functional in an airline chair. So we sort of invented our own system. We purchased a child's car seat, and I know that this is a you know solution that will not work for everyone. I am fortunate to be very small as a 32-year-old person. So I fit in a large child's car seat. But I know that that will work for a number of people that live with SMA. And we took that car seat and we had a handy friend make some holes in it and secure a chest harness so that I can be strapped in nicely. We bring a bag, we call it the flying bag or the wheelchair bag, that has all my tools like everyone else seems to fly with, as well as a variety of pillows and supports to get me in the perfect position in my car seat. And the only thing to be aware of is that in various types of airplanes and different classes of flight, their car seats are not always permitted. We've been on a few flights where they've said you're not allowed to have a car seat here, and we've gotten away with it by saying, "Oh no, this isn't a car seat; it's a medical device." And I actually now have a letter from one of my neurologists that says like he has to have the car seat on the airplane. I have no idea how legally binding that is, not very probably, but if you whip out a doctor's note, in most contexts, the people are agree and say, all right, we'll let you do it. So we've been able to use it on pretty much every flight we've ever taken. And it, like Jessica said, the downside is then you have a car seat that you have to lug around to wherever you're traveling. We bought a little hand truck on wheels. It's collapsible so that we can strap it to that, and then we strap all of our suitcases to that as well. So it's murdered me along, but it gets the job done.
Yes, that's great. Get creative, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so the next question is for everyone, and it's a question that I think most people who travel with wheelchairs think about before they get on an airplane. Might be the hardest part about it, actually, and that is, what eases your anxiety about trusting airline employees with your wheelchair? So if you can each give a tip or a strategy that you use that helps to kind of ease some of those anxieties, that would be great. And Cory, why don't you start us off, and then I'll just go around.
Yeah, so once I arrive at the gate of the plane and I'm waiting for it to board, I always ask the gate agent if I can speak with the ground crew that's going to be loading my wheelchair. And I do this to let them know exactly how to load it, like how to put it in manual mode to be able to push it. And I also think it really helps just to put a face to the equipment. So maybe they won't just be thinking this is another piece of luggage. They'll think oh, this is Cory's luggage, and I just met Cory and I don't want to harm his wheelchair. So I try to be as nice as possible to them, take gifts if you need to. They can be persuaded. So yeah, I really just ask to speak to the ground crew.
Christa, do you want to share any insight you have into traveling with your chair and helping to ease that anxiety that something could happen to it, or medical equipment?
Yeah. Well, I'm not really traveling by plane right now. But I go on a lot of cruises and road trips, and I think communication is very important. Telling them how important our chair is and how it works, and it's so important to communicate and just say it over and over and reiterate as much as you have to. But yeah, I think that's like the most important thing.
Christine, what would you say? What advice would you
Yeah,
give?
similar to Cory, I think if you have a chance to have that human to human moment with the ground crew, if not, I also print dramatic signs like we showed earlier, but they're of me. And I will say if I'm on a really important work trip, I think that's important. But I think a lot of the things we're saying, it's like the onus is on us. But they also need to show us that they know what they're doing and that they can be trusted. So I think it's a give and take of having the trust, and over time, we learn through experience. I think the first time my chair was broken, I felt like it truly was the end of the world. And the more that I learn about repairing and electronics, I just have to trust that it can also be fixed. So kind of trust on multiple levels to stay as cool and collected as possible. Oh, and traveling with like an awesome support system.
Shane, what advice would you give?
I would say traveling more. Like we have to obviously jump through all these hoops to like do everything we can to make sure we don't have problems. Problems are gonna happen, but the more I travel, the more I realize that more often than not, problems don't happen. And like, every trip I go on where nothing goes wrong is another reminder to myself that like this is very doable. This can happen in a way that doesn't end in catastrophe. And so yeah, I think just traveling more is a way that I remind myself that like, I am capable of doing this, and it's not going to be a horrible problem every time. Because more often than not, things go smoothly. As long as you do all your research and you don't have any water for 5 days leading up to your flight.
And you're good. Okay, Kevin, how about what piece of advice would you give to
I mean, I would basically piggyback off of a lot of what people have said, and like Shane said, I think some people travel once and their chair gets destroyed, but then if you've traveled 50 or 100 times and your footrest gets broken once, then you're like, oh, this actually doesn't have to be the norm, and I don't have to be as scared. And so that's been a big thing for me, is I didn't even mean for it to happen, but just realizing 2 years ago when my chair got pretty busted up on a flight, looking back and realizing, yeah, but what about all those other flights where everything was fine? Really helped to kind of keep me from never flying again. And then, but really, I would say the biggest thing for me is flying with friends and making friends along the way. I've had where the ground crew has actually come and gotten the friends that I'm flying with to go into the luggage section to help them get the chair in place, and which is kind of cool for my friends. He came back and he's like, that was the most amazing thing ever. I was in the bottom of the plane like Liam Neeson, so yeah, traveling with friends and making friends with the crew, like Cory said as well, and Christa.
Yeah. It's an adventure on every level, right? Okay, and then we had some questions about how do you, when you are not in the comfort of your own home and you don't have all of the tools that you usually use to eat and to write and to work, how do you make adaptations that work for you while you're on the go? So Christa, I think you had something that you always travel with or make sure that you have.
Yeah, I carry my black flexible straws everywhere. Plastic
Flexible straw.
straws. I carry them in my backpack.
Yes, a stash of flexible straws. And then Christine, what do you do while you're traveling?
Yeah, so I also smuggle plastic straws into the paper straw states. But I really like, usually I'm traveling for work. So there's prep or there's follow-up emails that need to happen. And a couple years ago, I discovered traveling with a handful of scarves, like not like the knitted stretchy ones, but there's more like I don't even know the fabric type, but those
Like
smooth
lightweight.
yeah, the smooth scarves. And I actually just tie up a little knot under my arm. So I like look like I'm being tied up. And if I have pressure right under the middle of my forearm, then I can still use my laptop and my mouse. So don't hold back from testing the waters to see what works for you. I mean, you could also actually enjoy your flight and like watch movies. You don't have to work, but the same setup holds. Just bring things that are from home that you use to make yourself comfortable and try it out on the flight.
Awesome. And then Kevin and Shane, I think, have some insight on utensils that they use. So Kevin, you want to share your tip?
Yeah, I keep so I have a book bag on the back of my chair, like I think a lot of us do, and in it I have a little blue box with Chick-fil-A forks. And actually people know just to give me Chick-fil-A forks. It's kind of my favorite thing in the world. So that's I always have those readily available because for me they're a good size and they're a good weight, but they're sturdier than like the normal plastic forks that you buy at the Dollar Tree kind of thing. But also I kind of like, you know, how you mentioned that Shane has asked people for help before. I really don't shy away from asking people to help me eat. You know, I mean, if the difference is whether I get to eat or whether I get to keep my pride, I'm gonna enjoy that bag of chips. You know, so.
And then Shane, what did you say you travel with or have found works well?
Yeah, I think that's a great point that Kevin made, is that one of the most important things ever in my disability journey was like being okay with asking for help to eat. As I lost the ability to feed myself, I for a very long time just like didn't eat enough. So like being comfortable just asking whoever you're with to help feed you is so big. And I know it's difficult, but like super it opens up a lot of opportunity, a lot of food. But I am a big snacker, and you know, in hotels at night and on airplanes, whatever, I love to be just snacking on something, but I can't quite lift even plastic silverware up to my mouth anymore. But I have found that the like kebab skewer sticks, the little wooden, they're like 12-inch wooden skewers, they're very sharp, that you use to make kebabs and other items, are very lightweight. They weigh almost nothing. They're long enough that I don't have to lift my hands very high to get the food all the way up to my mouth. And they're sharp enough that I can skewer a variety of items, whether it's cheese or I have found chips that work for it, or vegetables, whatever. I'm able to stab them with the sharp skewer and then raise it up to my mouth so that I can eat independently if I'm not in a situation where it's easy to ask for help.
Yeah, that's such a good idea. Thank you. All right, we're going to wrap up with one last question for everyone. Everyone's going to share what is your, what have you found to be the most accessible trip that you've gone on or location, and what one was maybe least accessible or that you wouldn't repeat. So I'm going to start with Christa.
Okay. Well, I go on a lot of cruises, so I would say I went to Hawaii. That was 14 days. Cruise ships are very, very accessible. And I like that everything's there. You don't have to worry about transportation. You know, once you're on the ship, everything's there. And you have fun and all the food you want. And so I love cruising. And road trips. I think I've never had like a bad experience, but I think if you don't plan enough, like I have to plan everything and make sure I pack everything. But otherwise, I don't have a bad experience.
That's great. Yeah, I think probably a lot of us have the best experience, right? And
Mhm.
it just comes down to the
Yeah.
planning.
Yeah.
Corey, how about you? What would you say is your most accessible location you've been to, or most enjoyable? Pick one.
I mean, I'll name three because I can't just pick one, but I would say
Sure.
Barcelona is phenomenally accessible. Like every mode of public transportation, they have really great accessible beaches. I'm in Barcelona, Spain. Also, Helsinki, Finland really surprised me. Every mode of public transportation accessible, and they had over 300 accessible taxis. So that was amazing. And I went in the dead of winter, and the sidewalks were heated. So it was really easy to get around. Like the snow wasn't a concern. I've also gone in the summer and it's equally as amazing. And then I recently went to Japan, which was like blew my mind. Loved it. Would go there a million more times. And then like my least favorite that I would not return to. I mean, I would honestly go anywhere again. I did not have a great experience in Paris. It was probably the most difficult trip for me, but that was like 13 years ago. And I've heard that accessibility has drastically improved since then. So I would love to give Paris another chance.
Awesome. Christine, how about you? What would be your most suggested location?
Yeah, so honestly, tourist spots are great because they are used to a higher volume of chairs flying into them. So I've had 0 issues in Las Vegas, and I've had also few issues in the Anaheim airport going to Disney. So like the Disney stops, Orlando's been great. I have complicated feelings about flying into Boston, but I still do. It might be confirmation bias, but I've just had a heck of a time every time I go there. And just having to kind of ground yourself with the historic buildings not being accessible. So yeah, those are my experiences.
Shane, how about you?
Yes, so I found that like most places I've been are accessible enough that I didn't have a great time there. So I think that is my headline. I think my favorite accessible experience isn't in one specific place, but rather taking the Eurostar train. I believe it's called the Eurostar, from London to Paris. And it goes in a few other, large cities across Europe. But one of the most accessible, and maybe I'm just a train guy, I don't know, but it was an incredible experience, so accessible. They made it very easy, and it allowed us to travel all across Europe very easily. I think my least favorite or least accessible was probably Prague in the Czech Republic. Just because it's a very, very old city and it was mostly cobblestone sidewalks and streets, which for me bobbles my head all over the place, makes it not fun to, spend a day exploring the city when I'm very uncomfortable and tired an hour into it. Again, though, like, even though it's the worst one on my list, I would probably go back. Like, there was enough fun memories made to warrant another trip, great food, and it wasn't very accessible, but it had a great time anyway. Thank you.
Awesome. And Kevin, what would you say? Favorite location?
Oh man, I might start the other way around. And just to clarify, I don't really know if I have one that I can say safely is not accessible. But I think a lot of you know, like a lot of my overseas travel has been not with my wheelchair. And when you're strapped to someone's back, pretty much everything's accessible. So I don't know if I can be a good judge on that. Other than to say, you know, if you want to go somewhere and you get creative with it, there are ways. I think we can all attest to that. There are ways to do what you want to do with the people that you love and want to do it with. But as far as what I have experienced, especially overseas or out of the US, my wife and I went to Sydney, Australia, and yeah, Cory's like, heck yeah. And it was awesome. And like I asked her about this question, and she said, oh yeah, I felt like Australia was really accessible. And even the I don't even know what you call them, the public bathrooms on the sidewalk, like it's like a phone booth, but it's a bathroom kind of thing. But even those were like big enough to be wheelchair accessible, and the buses were great, and the trains were great, and so that was a really good experience. I also feel like London, if it's sunny and beautiful weather, London is a great accessible place because you can just take sidewalks everywhere. So, yeah.
Perfect. So as long as you can control the weather, London is a
Yeah.
go.
Perfect.
Yeah, no problem. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for being with us tonight. We just really appreciate your time and your experience. I know everyone gets a lot out of listening to you share your stories. So we have just a little bit more information that we want to share with everybody this evening. So give us just 1 minute. There we go. So we want to thank everyone for coming tonight. Thank you to each of our panelists. Before we say goodnight, we just have a couple of things we want to cover. When the meeting ends this evening, a survey from Zoom will pop up and appear in your browser, and we would really appreciate your feedback and any ideas that you can share on this webinar. We also want to let everyone know that SMA will be hosting a webinar with Scholar Rock on December 18th at 11 a.m. Central Time. You can join us to hear from Scholar Rock on their clinical trial programs, and you can find more information and register for this event by scanning this QR code here on the screen. Again, we'd like to thank our gold sponsors, Biogen and Genentech, and silver sponsor Scholar Rock for their generous sponsorship of this Traveling with SMA Resource Webinar. We could not do this without you. And finally, thank you all for attending and joining this evening. We hope it's been informative and helpful. If you have questions, please feel free to email me directly or to our community support team. Our contact information is here, along with the link to the new webpage, which includes all the resources and programs that we reviewed in this webinar this evening. So thank you again so much for joining, and have a wonderful rest of your week. Good night.
Bye.